Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. Today's guest is somebody I have wanted to sit down with ever since I saw her speak live at the World Business Forum event in New York City in the fall of 2024. Today, I'm joined by Amy Edmondson, the Novartis Professor of Leadership and Management at Harvard Business School, best-selling author of The Fearless Organization and her newest book, Right Kind of Wrong, which she published in 2023. If you've ever heard the phrase psychological safety, there is a good chance you've been influenced by Amy. Amy, I have to say that your teaching has genuinely changed how I lead, how our teams operate. And today I want to keep this real. I want to talk about fear, silence, leadership, and how great teams actually learn fast without falling apart. So Amy, welcome to Retaining Purpose. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. What a great intro.
Yeah, thank you. You know, I love pumping up some tires. So Amy, back in 2004 in November, I was at an event in New York City at the World Business Forum. You were one of the speakers at that event. And I can single-handedly say that event as a whole is probably something that changed my style of leadership. The influence of that event was huge. Within that, though, your insights into something that I had never really thought of when it came to psychological safety, really did impact how I left that event and now looking at how I lead and the teams I'm leading a year and a half later. And one thing you said in that event, you talked about fear-based leadership only works when uncertainty, interdependence, and subjectivity are low, essentially referring to the industrial era, right? Are leaders still, or why do leaders still default to that fear-based leadership today?
Oh, it's such a great question, Randy. And I want to be sure that we're clear on that. It's, if there's very high certainty, very high objectivity and very low interdependence, meaning I can do my tasks alone without needing to coordinate and cooperate with you, then fear works simply because everything's so transparent. You can directly see. I'm not saying fear is good, but I'm saying it could work, right? Because the manager can directly see whether you are doing what you said you would do. It's almost as if your brain doesn't matter. And so I can frighten you into just working as hard as you're capable of working. I might lose you to a competitor, but nonetheless, you can see the relationship there between fear and effort. But in knowledge work, right? In today's knowledge work, it just doesn't, if you think about the work as requiring problem solving and cooperation and creativity, fear will just get in the way. It constricts our ability to think outside the box, to solve hard problems, and to take the interpersonal risks, most importantly, that we need to take to have great teams. So it's sort of a simple point, but it's quite profound. Okay, so why doesn't, given that it's pretty simple, why are many managers still under the illusion that fear works? And I think there's several explanations. One is just it's habit, right? This is maybe the model they grew up with. It's how they sort of thought it was supposed to be done. And then if you push them on it and say, well, do you see that this might not work? They will be, but really, are people really going to work hard if they're not a little bit afraid of you? And I'll say yes. In fact, it's called purpose, but we'll get to that.
Yeah.
But it just doesn't work. So what they will work hard at doing is making sure they look good, not making sure they are good, not making sure they're really contributing to the purpose with their colleagues, fully engaged, solving the problems that need solving, delighting the customers that need delighting, but rather they'll be busier with a second job. And the second job is called impression management. Right. So when you've got someone with two jobs, they won't be doing as good a job on the first job.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you think about that, was there maybe not a definitive shift, but what's changed in business today to all of a sudden make this, or has it always been the same, but what's changed to make this more prevalent? This collaborative mentality, this ability to kind of free up the worker to do crazy, incredible things, right? Without being scared of making that mistake?
I think, again, there's a lot of contributing factors, and one is, maybe the thinkers and the writers who have sort of documented the kinds of organizations that really hum along, that really succeed, the kinds of places where people want to come to work in the morning, look forward to teaming up with their colleagues, and that are, they're customer focused and just, eager to be there to make a difference, right? And when we really unpack those organizations, few and far between, perhaps, we find that those are organizations with healthy learning cultures and people who feel like what they do matters, and it does, and leaders who've sort of caught on to that sort of new way of working. So some of it is just time and some healthy models where it's working. Some of it may be just the maybe one of the positive impacts of the pandemic was that it was a real wake up call. Right? People just started noticing things that we'd taken for granted. Right? We might, we notice when people are at their best or what it takes to have people feel engaged, and when that was suddenly taken away for so many people all at once, it just made us more aware of what good looks like when it's present.
Right.
And then, I think it's just a sort of a groundswell and then a growing recognition that innovation and problem solving and creativity are more important to your organization's success than ever before.
Yeah. So you started doing your research on this in the 1990s, right? I'm assuming quite a bit has changed in what you see today versus what you first started seeing in the early 1990s, right? What's one of the most significant changes you've seen over those years?
I suppose the biggest change is what you alluded to earlier, which is that there's growing and greater recognition that it's not just a few special places with great cultures and, and great teamwork, but it's a sort of a growing recognition across the board, whether you're at General Motors or Apple, that, teamwork matters, knowledge work matters, creativity matters, innovation is the name of the game. And so I think it's really just a matter of scale and spread, because honestly, and maybe this is because my field is human behavior, not, tech, IT or handful of other things it could be. And human behavior doesn't really change that much, right? The context we're finding ourselves in are dramatically different, but the needs, the fears, the passions are so enduring in terms of what humans need and what we need to thrive and what we need to do our best work. That hasn't changed as much as we like to think.
No, for sure. And do you think, when it comes to leaders learning these new ways of leading, can the impact be felt at a large corporation, an Apple, a Microsoft, or small business owner, right? Where do you think that impact can really be driven home so that more and more people even start to change?
Well, I actually think small businesses, and particularly small owner-managed businesses, are the best place to make these changes and experience these transformations, because really you have so much more opportunity to have an impact. If you are a manager in a very large organization, you can feel, it's not completely true, but you can feel like your impact is quite small. And that said, in fact, your impact is large, because it's the people that you are interacting with you can change their lives in a positive or a negative way. And that's enough, right? That impact really matters. But if you're a CEO of an enormous global company, you might think, oh, your impact is just huge. Nope. Like your impact is on your team, who hopefully, if you're having the right kind of impact, they're impacting their team, and it cascades down to having an impact, but it's diluted at best, and limited in many ways. Like you can work really hard, and you should, to create an organization with uniform engagement, learning, respect. but it's I think the sweet spot really is sort of the small to mid-sized businesses where you as a leader can dramatically impact the functioning of the organization.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm with you. I think that's where it is, right? I think we can all learn from lessons within those large organizations, but I think the impact really does come at that SME level. And I want to share actually kind of my story and where the change came with me since 2024, walking away from that and reading your two books. And it was actually funny. A couple nights ago, was kind of just down here relaxing one night. And I always make notes when I go to events, and I came across the notes that I had from when you were speaking, and it just brought back this flood of memories. But I had, two things have happened in the last year. One is we kind of had a significant turnover in our leadership team because it was obvious we didn't have the right people. And what that led to is I have one guy now who I think throughout the entire year, and he has said it, I confuse him more than ever anybody he's worked for. And he's 49. And he said to me, "Do you never get mad?" And I'm like, right? Like, what an amazing statement.
Yeah.
And I said, I don't get mad. We're all going to make mistakes. We're all in positions of learning. And so, yeah, he's fun. I said, my goal in life is just keep confusing you. But I had one young gentleman, because I work in construction, right? So construction is pretty slow to change.
True.
Got a young man working for me. He's 23 years old. And, last summer he did a job, and it should have taken about 60 minutes to do, and it took him 6 hours. He did so many things not the way he should have done. And I said some things at the end of the day in front of the group that I went home that night and I immediately regretted. And then the next morning I came back, gave him a $25 gift card to Tim Hortons, we're in Canada. And I said, keep trying, right? Like, you didn't quit. You didn't give up. You learned, right? And I think that if I look back on 10 years from now, that is probably going to be the defining moment that changed the company forever. And that's because of you. So,
well, thank you. I'm so honored and gratified. And, I think in both the Fearless organization and in Right Kind of Wrong, I include those sort of what I call apocryphal stories. They can be true or not true, but hopefully they're true, that live on in an organization, sometimes for decades. And it's stories like that where someone either makes a mistake or delivers a suboptimal performance, and instead of being fired or, punished in some way, the leader turns it into a learning experience. And, and one of them is a sort of famous, maybe apocryphal, but I think true story from Tom Watson at IBM, where young manager makes this mistake and it costs the company whatever it was, a large sum of money. Let's call it $50,000, and the back then, right? And the young manager has to meet with Watson, and he's so anxious, and he finally blurts out, "Can't you get it over with? Fire me already." And Watson says, "Fire you? Why would I fire you? I just spent $50,000 educating you." Now, for
I love it.
decades, you could tap any IBMer on the shoulder and they could tell you that story.
Yeah.
And that's what culture is, right? Culture is those moments when those moments of disappointment turn into learning instead. It's worth its weight in gold.
Oh yeah, I love that story. I'd actually never heard that before, but somebody just told me the other day, every lesson has a cost attached to it, right? Every learning opportunity has a cost attached to it. As long as you look at it as an investment,
right.
But you also frame it in, there's certain mistakes that we don't want to repeat, right? The simple.
Right. Right.
But other than that, celebrate some of these failures. You even talked about have a failure party.
Right. I didn't make it up, right? I just discovered them in companies ranging from Eli Lilly to, Microsoft, just where people get together, and it's not really, it's not a champagne affair, right? It's you get together and you sort of go through the ritual, maybe over pizza and beer, maybe not, but you go through the ritual of what happened, what did we set out to do? What actually happened? what's the difference and why, and what do we do? What do we do going forward? And these rituals bring us together at a very human level, and they provide genuine learning that's
Right.
useful.
Yeah, it forces everybody into a vulnerable position, right? Pretty hard not to want to share some of your mistakes you've made when everybody else is being open and honest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So why is it then, you still see some of that, nobody wanting to disagree with leadership? You end up with a leader who ends up in his vacuum, his silo, echo chamber, whatever you want to call it. How do we, as somebody who owns a business, how do we bridge that gap and open up those communication channels?
Well, honestly, there's two reasons, right? There's two factors that are often both operating. And one is that the leaders have blind spots, right? The leaders themselves are unaware of the impact they're actually having and believe themselves to be having the impact they intend to have. Right. And so that's just a blind spot, right? Like, I intend to be effective. I intend to be compelling. I intend to have high standards and be inspiring and so forth. And that's a good intention. All of those are good intentions. But as a leader, many leaders are unaware of the actual impact. So that's a gap, right? And nobody's, this is all part of the first factor. Nobody's telling them that there's a gap, right? No one's helping educate them to understand that the impact they're trying to have is not the impact they're actually having. So it's the blind spots on the leader side. The other side is that many people, let's call them followers for now, but people who are in the position of serving the organization in a role below the leader, are bringing their past experiences and mental models to the new job, right? So their prior experiences have been with leaders who were tough or unforgiving or unhelpful when things went wrong. And once you have those experiences at all, you don't tend to want to test to see whether they're still true. Right. So you hold yourself back. You don't engage in testing where the limits are. You just sort of, you play not to lose.
Right. You're threading that needle.
Yeah. You thread that needle. So you're engaged again in impression management. And so, if you think about, many people bringing their own expectations about what managers are like or leaders are like, combined with leaders themselves having blind spots, then you've got an overdetermined phenomenon. Or even though it's not optimal, doesn't serve the customers, doesn't serve the company, it perpetuates itself.
Right. Are leaders learning enough right now? Like, yeah. Okay. I'll let you go with that one.
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you what popped into my head. Two things. One is, I don't have systematic data on that, right? I can't confidently say leaders are or are not learning enough right now. But the other thing that popped into my head was that I think AI is having a funny impact, right? Because it's of course it's incredibly powerful tool or tools, and an awful lot of things that people used to actually benefit from thinking through themselves. The kind of deep thinking you do when you're trying to make a tough decision or analyze a market or analyze some candidates for a role, a promotion, perhaps. When you can sort of take a shortcut, most of us human beings will, right? So we take a shortcut and then we stop. We stop having the kind of effortful cognitive experiences that actually allow us to learn, to stretch ourselves. And I think the jury's out on how much we're learning versus how much people are sort of producing. You can produce a lot of pages. If you give me 5 minutes here, I can get 25-page paper written for you.
Pretty quick.
There it is. Did I learn anything from doing that? Probably not very much.
I've got to make a note here because that just stretched my mind a little bit. The difference between learning and producing, right? And I think again in business, I don't care what business you're in, you want to produce. That's why we're in business, right?
Right.
So now I'm
yeah, I
almost
mean,
more
there's this
scared now.
deep, well, don't be scared. Like, actually, what I think is today, and this relates to what we were talking about right at the outset, but today the need, it isn't whether you choose producing over learning. It's that you have to choose producing via learning. Right? And I refer to that as execution as learning versus execution as efficiency, right? If you're only thinking in terms of what's the output, there's all sorts of ways to generate tons of output. But if you're thinking about it as output that is exquisitely responsive to the market or to the employee's needs, or to the customer's needs, that is the kind of output you produce when you're noticing what's happening, what's working, what's not working, and then tweaking as you go. That's high quality output that also is requiring you to learn in order to produce it well.
Right. You're creating an environment of continual learning, feedback loops and everything else. And then all of a sudden production stems out of that. So
right.
Do you think people get afraid of just, when you say, producing versus learning, and everybody looks at learning as this, something that can just take a long time. Yeah. And it takes time and it's going to take me forever. I need to just produce now. Right.
Right.
I don't think learning's taking as long as it ever used to.
No. And I think it's a false dichotomy, right? Because again, I think high quality, let's say consulting, right? And we could talk about construction too, but like consulting, high quality consulting is a learning activity. I have to learn enough about the client's situation and needs to be helpful. That's no small thing. Similarly, you can't engage in a high quality construction project or bid on one without learning an awful lot about the context and the client and the situation and the land. I mean, there's so many dimensions to it, and the materials. And so it is, by definition, a learning activity. And the higher quality projects are going to be the ones with a higher learning quotient.
The threshold's going to be higher. Yeah, for sure. Interesting. What's, if we go down that rabbit hole a little bit more, I wouldn't mind actually diving into the construction industry as a whole a little bit. I think it's being quicker to adopt AI now. In the I think in the past it's usually pushed back against some of that. So as my audience, which may be people in my industry and Alberta, Canada, and the construction industry, what would be a good, first step for some of these guys or women to be able to say, okay, I'm going to, other than reading your book?
I wouldn't have said that. But of course, that's always a good idea.
It is. It's a good first step because it lays a lot of the groundwork, right? But what's a good first step for somebody to say, okay, I want my organization to change. Hopefully they have enough recognition that with that change, they're number one, they have to change. What would be a good first step for some of these people?
I think that the first step is to double down on purpose and goals, meaning to really pause to say, what do we care about? What's the difference we're trying to make? And, what goals are we trying to achieve? And do that out loud and, with your team. Like, you really want to get everyone on the same page. And this is why, because everything I'm about to say is hard work. And when are we willing to do hard work? When we care. When we care enough about the result, we're willing to, to lean and work hard. So, it starts with a kind of a clarity and a reminding of what's at stake and why it matters, right? Why you care. And then number two is really lean into the need for high quality conversations amongst professionals, that people bring different ideas, different skill sets, different hopes and dreams. And when we combine them, we're better than any one of us on our own, right? So you have to, and having high quality conversations where we share ideas and solve problems and make decisions is not easy. Right? This is actually highly skilled work. It requires curiosity. It requires listening. It requires dreaming big. brainstorming, generating options, evaluating. It's like analytic, it's creative, it's all this stuff. And we have to listen to each other, right? We have to listen to each other as if the other's voice matters as much as yours, right? Not everybody does this well. So these are skills we can develop. And the more we develop them, the better, the more valuable we are to our firms, to our colleagues, and to the world, frankly. So it's, and then thirdly, build in, and this is something I know you do already in your industry, but build in structures and systems, rituals, whether it's the after action reviews, the quick check on that everything was done the right way before we move on. I mean, any industry where worker safety is an issue is usually an industry where there's more thoughtfulness, right? Because you've learned the hard way that we really do have to have checklists or whatever the scaffolding, literally and figuratively, the scaffolding you need to make sure we don't forget to do something we know we have to do. So structure is your friend, systems are your friend. Have high quality conversations, but double down on purpose and goals.
One of the things I love about my team right now is I have people from usually 18 all the way up to, I have a 76-year-old. And I will tell you, purpose and goals is a lot different conversation, depending what your audience is. But I can say with confidence that if you just keep at it, because that's one thing I think it's really quick to say this isn't working, right? It's too hard. But we've stuck with it. And now going into year 2, we can already start to see some of the benefits of it. So what are some of those cross generational, we got, I think 4 generations at our work right now.
I'm glad you brought that up because there's actually, and I hadn't paid attention to it before, but there are 2 kinds of goals, right? There's my goals, my career goals, my life goals, my goals for this year, but there's also our goals. And the ones I want you to double down on initially, especially as a leader, is the firm goals, right? Why does it matter that your company exists? What's the positive difference you're making in the world? And then you're right, the individuals in your organization have their own goals that are nested in your goals. And some of them are outside, have nothing to do with work and you. And some are career goals that will be helped to be realized by the work they do with you. Even if they don't stay with you a whole career, you are on the path toward their future success. And the more they understand that, the better they will be as an employee and as a team member. So I think it's actually important to talk about both kinds of goals openly, explicitly.
Yeah.
It's okay to have individual goals and we have collective goals. And now and then they're in tension, and then we should talk about it.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting because what we have seen is that we've moved from somewhat of a selfish work environment to a selfless work environment.
Ooh.
Right? Looking out, we really preach and talk about integrity, doing what's right when no one's looking and doing it for the person beside you, right? So. It's exciting seeing those transitions.
Yeah. And by the way, it turns out that that's good for the individual too.
Yeah.
If you are operating in and being trained in a high integrity environment where it's not about selfishness, it's about doing something together that none of us could have done alone.
Yeah.
Then you're becoming a better, more able person, right? You're picking up skills and experiences that will help you be more successful in your life. So you don't have to trade off okay, I'll just be a selfless person and not get anything out of it and make sure that, that Randy gets his needs met.
Yeah.
No. That's not what we're talking about. It's kind of both and. Yeah,
for sure. And I think, with the group that we have right now, I think we're seeing it, this really neat knitting of the old and the young. And we always tell our guys, no matter what age they come to us at, that, hopefully you're here for a long time, but if you aren't, we want you to leave here better than when you came and be a contributor,
Perfect.
right?
I mean, I think that's such an important part of the employee value proposition, right? That if they, and I've always wanted anyone who worked for me. I mean, that's my test, right? Do they end up better off as a result? And if they don't, I failed.
Yeah, well, and that's exactly it. And it's funny, but when you tell somebody that, they actually look at you quite confused. Because I think even as employees, they're walking in with this industrial era mentality, which is, I'm going to do right, I'm going to do wrong.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And you pay me to do a job, so why would it matter to you if I end up better off as a result?
Yeah, you've probably seen that John Hamm clip from Mad Men, where he's yelling, and if you haven't, you should look it up. Where he's yelling at it, I pay you, you do the work, it's a transaction, right? So I think that's what everybody's expecting.
Yeah, except that if you get known as the kind of organization where people are developed, then you have your recruiting costs go way down.
Sure, absolutely, definitely. Amy, can we pivot to failure? So you define failure as 3 different types: basic, complex, and intelligent. Can you walk us through those?
So basic failures are preventable, and they have a single cause, usually human error. Basic failures occur in familiar territory, right? So if you fail to put the bolt in and the structure collapses, it's a basic failure. And I think it goes without saying, but we want to prevent those. And we have the capability to prevent them. Now, human error will always be a part of human life, but still, that's why we put in systems and so on to try to prevent them. Okay, complex failures are multi-causal. They're the perfect storms. They're the kinds of failures that happen when a handful of contributing factors come together in just the wrong way. And generally, any one of those factors on its own wouldn't cause a failure. It's the way they all came together, right? So that you might think of this as, small deviations from best practice. Yeah, you get away with it. You cut a corner or two, nothing bad happens. But if they come together, a whole bunch of them, then, you get a breakdown, a system breakdown. And those two, I think, especially in construction, when you're at your best, we don't have those, right? We're really, that's right. To mix metaphors, we're dotting every I, we're crossing every T, we're careful, we're cautious, we're vigilant, right? So I'm not a fan of having those kinds of failures happen because both of them are theoretically preventable. Now, occasionally they'll sneak through, and we then do our very best to learn from them and prevent them from happening another time. The third kind is the good kind. The third kind, I call them, as you said, intelligent failures. These are the still undesired results of thoughtful forays into new territory, right? Another way to say that is these are experiments that didn't work out. And new territory matters here because if, it's the project, you've never done a project like this before, or it's a new material or a new technology or a new terrain, and you simply can't know in advance what's going to work. You have to experiment. Now, what makes them intelligent is that their cost is as small as possible. Right? You don't put up a giant building to see whether it might stand up, right? You test in a lab, or you try small scale tests of the novel phenomenon to see what works and what doesn't, and then you learn from that, and then you're ready to grow and try something bigger. So simply put, intelligent failures are the unavoidable results of thoughtful experiments.
Yeah, that is great. You actually made me think, it's that test, iterate, right?
Yep.
Made me think of Jim Collins when he writes about, in Good to Great, about the pirate ship, right? You fire a few small calibrated bullets before you fire the big cannonball. Yeah. Otherwise you're probably going to have your ship sunk. So. Right.
And you don't want your ship sunk, and you don't want to waste expensive ammunition. You want to just take small tests.
Yeah. So as leaders, are we used to not treating those 3 different types of failure as different?
No. And that's why it's interesting, right? The classification itself is, okay, that's fun. But what I have found in organizations is that many leaders, many organizations don't do a good enough job of having a different response to different kinds of failure, right? So there's a failure and it's just a blow up, or you feel bad and small for having been a part of it. Whereas, good organizations are going to celebrate intelligent failures, again, no champagne, but you're going to say, wow, that's a great discovery. That gave us new information we couldn't have gotten any other way. And what do we try next? Right? So it's like, obviously, life sciences, pharma, they live and die by the intelligent failure. They run scientific experiments or they run clinical trials, and they run into failure a lot because by definition, they're in new territory. And you can have a good hypothesis, but you're never going to be always right in new territory. But when organizations respond to all failures, basic, complex, or intelligent, as if they were caused by either a blameworthy act or, someone not trying hard enough, people get the message, emotionally they get the message. And so then the result is not that they suddenly become perfect people or producers, but rather that they are more likely to hide the bad news, right? And when the bad news is hidden, nobody's learning. Either that, or they only take safe bets, right? They only set their targets where they know with 80% certainty that they can hit them.
I love what you said right there, because it kind of brought it back up all the way to our starting conversation about producing, right? And
right.
If all of a sudden they have this fear of making that mistake, they're no longer, they can't be the perfect producer anymore, right? So I'm going to play it safe and I'm going to stay over here.
Right. Play it safe. And you don't want people playing it safe, hiding, mailing it in. You want people playing to win and going for it and knowing, in thoughtful ways. And by the way, people should be encouraged to, if they have a new idea, a new territory, check it out with a couple of colleagues, because maybe someone will know something you don't, and then use that information. But if it's really new territory for us in this firm, then let's go give it a nice, small, smart try.
Yeah, find an area where we can test that out. So what would you recommend then for, if you think about the basic and even the complex, and I've been sitting here for a few minutes now trying to come up with the proper wording for this, but I can't get out of the industrial era. How do you punish, right? And bad word choice, full acknowledgement.
No, I know what you mean. What should the result, what should the consequences be?
Yeah. And then how do you balance that or harmonize between, that conversation at that level versus the conversation at the other level, saying one is okay. Yeah. This one isn't.
I mean, you have to back up first because two things. One, we're all fallible, right? All of us will make mistakes at some point. And if we are punished for being human, it's not a good look, right? Because we're all human, right? So we have to, and the backup part is you have to be, as a leader, as a company, you have to be clear at the outset where the blameworthy acts begin, like where the boundaries are. So let's say, for, just obvious examples, disrespectful behavior, bullying, sexual harassment, right? There are things that everybody knows, but still you should be clear about it, are not acceptable. And when people transgress those boundaries, there should be consequences. And I'm not saying one shot and you're out, but, feedback in a very clear, no nonsense way is given. And if then the behavior can't be redirected, then we will show you the door, right? So, first of all, really excellence comes from, ironically, being clear about what's bad. If people don't know what's not accepted around here, they'll just tiptoe and they won't be anywhere, or they'll be surprised when you punish something that, well, you never told me, that wasn't okay. So it is not the case, it's not that, people can just do whatever you want and you should always have a positive response. No. And so again, we'll all make mistakes, but let's say I keep making the same mistake. That too, right? That endangers other colleagues, that endangers our product. So, maybe there's a line of work that will be better suited for your talents, but this ain't it. right? So it's, I'm talking here about the need for all leaders and all colleagues to be able to have difficult, tough conversations, because ultimately the work is the boss, right? The the customer is the work we have to do together is the thing that none of us are allowed to opt out of, right? So if sometimes we do end up with having tough conversations because the behavior isn't consistent with what we need to do around here to be excellent. And so, and then, maybe a related set of issues is how do you manage such that you have as few basic and complex failures as possible? And that is a whole set of things that I'm sure you already do very well, like checklists, like certifications, like anything you can do to operationalize vigilance.
Yeah. Yeah.
Both
and I think a lot of that,
and structures. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think a lot of that comes down to culture too, right? Because if you do have that culture of learning, you're going to turn out higher quality people on the back end that are going to be less prone to making those basic mistakes, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I have a whole section in chapter 3 of the book, which is the basic failure chapter, about the basics of basic failure. And I will talk about this sometimes, just say, this is the boring part, right? I know it's boring, but boy, is it valuable and important, right? Checklists, training, good leadership, open lines of, if you have an employee who isn't quite sure about how to do something and they're afraid to ask for help, that's a failure that needs to be prevented.
Exactly.
Right. That's a problem. That's not good. Right.
No.
Every employee needs to know that when they feel slightly in over their head on something, you get to ask. And if you don't ask, the Navy is good about this. Like if you didn't ask for help and we find out later you didn't ask for help, then that's a punishable offense. But asking for help is never a punishable offense. So these are the kinds of, systems and attitudes that high reliability organizations put into place because the stakes are high.
Yeah. So if we look at intelligent failure, I kind of framing it simply, pilot projects. Let's just say it that way,
pilots.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
How do you create room for pilot projects in an existing business structure while maintaining the quality and not losing the standards that you've set?
It's a great question. And the short answer is out loud, right? So in other words, make the tension discussable, right? Because just as your question set it all. It's like, we need like perfect execution in the things we already know how to do, the things we can do in our sleep, but please don't, let's do them awake. But there's no reason, especially when we're supporting each other and got all the systems in place, there is no reason not to have magnificently perfect execution in known territory. Meanwhile, if we don't carve out some portion of our time, resources, effort on inventing the future, we're doing fine today, but we will be in trouble, next year, the year before, the year after, whatever, 5 years from now. So it's about being open and explicit about the dilemma. And then by being open and explicit, you sort of name the tension and you invite other people in to help solve it. So you say, hey, we're going to be really high standards over here, and we're going to carve out a little bit of time over here for pilots. And by the way, we will know that they were not good pilots if they all succeeded, right? If you know in advance it's going to succeed, it's not a pilot. It's just a demonstration project. So, I don't know what would be I can't give you a number, but what's the right percent of intelligent failures, right? It's not zero.
Yeah. Yeah. And I hadn't actually thought about it that way, because I can easily see how a person would be like, oh, we're going to do a pilot. I'm comfortable with this. I know we're going to succeed.
No, you're not. Right. Yeah.
Therefore, let's do that one.
It's not a pilot.
Yeah. Isn't that funny? What does rewarding speaking up look like in practice? Like, I told you the story about me walking in with a $25 Timmy's card, right? What does that look like? Like, what have you seen?
Yeah. You mentioned the $25, but it doesn't have to be money, right? I mean, most of us, here's our deepest human need is to believe that we matter. And when someone, actually a peer, even a subordinate, but especially a leader, lets us know that we matter. Like, well, that was a great idea, Amy, or, your talk made a difference. Like that is such reward. You don't, I like the gift certificates and things too. I really do. I like a variety, keep it interesting, keep it fun, but we just want to feel that we matter, that I made a difference in your life today, or I made a difference to a customer or to a colleague. It fulfills a deep need for us.
Do you see benefit in inter-team reward? And what I mean by that is the rewards not always coming from up high. Engaging and ensuring the team actually participates in what that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, I think, there's so many different, sort of practices, I would say, out there, but they boil down to a kind of a gold star, idea where people, if you can nominate one of your colleagues who was super helpful to you this week, or who, just made a difference with a warm smile or a cup of coffee when you were really struggling on something, right? It's I think that you can invent your own, every team or every company should feel free to invent their own systems, but by inviting others to be the observers who help reward their colleagues, you're not only helping the colleagues who get attention from, the recognition, but also you're helping them because you're turning them into observers, researchers who are helping notice and build the culture that you want.
Yeah. Awesome. I want to go back to 2024. I asked a question then, and I actually got a little bit of a laugh out of you on stage. And I'm very happy I had written that question down. So I'm going to ask it again. And it's funny because when I read it to myself a couple days ago, it very much was speaking to the place I was at, in business, in my learning and everything else. But the question I'd asked was, how do you shift a team from whining to sharing? What does that look like? How do you get a group that maybe has just gone down that rabbit hole of woe is me, and break them up and break them out of that mold?
I can't remember what I said then, but I'll tell you what I say now, which is you call it out, you name it. Producing that shift does not have to be kept secret to produce it. In fact, quite the opposite. So I think you basically own it. You say, I'm observing a pattern of whining that I would love to transform, and I need your help, into a pattern of contributing. And wow, we have so much opportunity ahead. We have such a sort of special opportunity to make a difference in this project with this company, whatever it is. And there's absolutely no way I can do it without your help. So, I need you. I need to hear from you. I need your ideas. And I probably need your ideas on how this shift can be made.
For the record, you were almost bang on what you said then. But I really wanted kind of the audience to hear you say it, because I don't want to lose the impact of that statement that you just made. Because I think too often when I've been guilty of this myself, when we end up with a team that just is in that woe is me, the doldrums, the whining phase, it's just easier as a leader sometimes to go, oh my gosh, just get over it, right? Like,
yeah.
But that's also the point where we need to step up. Like, now is our turn, right?
And you need to name it, right? I think too many leaders are like, oh, I can't say, they're acting like victims or they're whining. I can't say that. That would be insulting. Well, you can say it. I mean, you can't say it like it's like you're a victim, but you can say, I'm observing, I'm hearing, I'm puzzled even. And honestly, I need your help, because this isn't going to cut it. Like, we really have some exciting and challenging work to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I guess at the end of all that, you can decide, if the switch flips, great.
Right. If it doesn't, you can keep trying, but at some point you sort of say, this isn't the team I need, because really life is too short. and the projects matter too much
Yeah.
to waste it with woe is me.
Yeah, totally. It's let's move on and do something special together, right? So,
Yeah.
Amy, aim high, team up, fail well, learn fast, repeat. If you were to say one thing to the people listening right now, where should they start this week and why?
Well, I would say start by choosing learning over knowing, right? And that's not the same as choosing learning over producing, right? We've already established learning and producing go hand in hand, but think about, especially, the further along you are in your career, the more likely you will have been rewarded for knowing things.
Mm-hmm.
And you can get stuck as a knower. You can suddenly become a know-it-all. And we don't live in that world anymore. But this is a world where all expertise and all professional knowledge keeps moving fast, whether you're moving with it or not. So find it in your heart and in your head to choose curiosity, choose learning, and get on the path toward sort of learning and progress with which is a team sport, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And no matter the age we're at, right, it never stops.
Correct.
I had a chance to see Mr. Collins in Chicago in October this past year at one of his workshops. And he said something there. He said, I just turned 67 and I'm just getting started. Right. and I love that. It's so often, and it's funny actually being in Mexico right now. I'm surrounded by quite a few retired people and people that are talking about retirement. Right. And they're like, yeah, 55, I got my pension, got this. And I'm just sitting there going, oh man, I'm 51 and I am like chomping at the bit to just
so much to do. There's so much to do.
Yeah. And this is the fun part of life because now we have all this, wisdom, or so we think we do anyways.
Yeah.
And just to get out there and share it. So yeah, I love it. Learn and, be open and creative. That's perfect. Amy, I want to thank you for your time today. This was something I've looked forward to for several months now. Appreciate you saying yes. And,
that's a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, for sure. Where are you going to be in the next, what's this year have in store for you actually? So you travel a lot.
I'm going to be all over, but when I'm in my teaching semester, which is right now, I'm fairly stable, not completely stable here in Boston with the snow. But I do have some trips planned to Switzerland, Italy, the Netherlands, Portugal. So
awesome. That's amazing.
A little bit of fun.
That's fantastic. Well, I wish you luck with the rest of your semester and with all your travels this year. And I'm going to keep an eye out where you're speaking next. So I plan on crossing paths with you one more day here. So
I'd love that.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Amy.
Thank you.